basically the state will grow as large as people let it. And it has a tendency, a proclivity to grow, to expand, and to add layers and layers upon itself. And every other candidate that's in this race is talking about adding something. Even RFK Jr. It's talking about adding these different layers to look over these other layers, to look over these other layers. All of this has to go.
This is Kaiser Johnson with our Black Friday specials for November 23rd through November 27th, 2023 while supplies last. First, we feature 1/10 ounce gold eagles at $32 over melt with a minimum of 5 coins. Next, silver Nordic Mint 5-ounce bars at just $1.99 over spot per ounce with a minimum purchase of 10 bars. We also have 1-ounce silver 2023 Britannia at $2.69 over spot when you order 50 or more coins. And finally, Dealer's Choice silver 10-ounce bars are just $1.49 over spot per ounce with a minimum of 4 bars. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.
Welcome back to Liberty and Finance. We are privileged to have this returning guest, Michael Rectenwald, the author of many books, including The Great Reset and the Struggle for Liberty, also known as the Anti-Woke Professor, is here with us. He's also been nominated as a candidate running for the Libertarian Party's nomination for President of the United States. Michael, thanks for coming back on Liberty and Finance. Today is Monday, November 20th, 2023.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me, Dunnigan.
You've spoken with us several times in the past about what it means to be an anti-woke professor, what it means to be an anti-globalist, what it means to be standing up for liberty. In fact, the subtitle of your book, The Great Reset, is "And the Struggle for Liberty, Unraveling the Global Agenda." That's kind of going to frame a lot of what we talk about, but I'd like to come at it through the angle, which is new, of your nomination to be a candidate. You're a candidate seeking the Libertarian Party's endorsement for President of the United States. So if we could talk about that. The first question I have for you is, do you believe that elections even matter anymore? A lot of people have been questioning that since 2016, 2012, 2020. What is your view on whether elections matter?
Well, I think that there's definitely been interference in the elections. There's been nefarious activities all around elections. And there has been malfeasance, electoral malfeasance. And that, I think, is very evident in what happened in 2020. But I do think that elections still matter, and campaigns matter. They matter because it allows candidates to voice their views and to get certain views into the political sphere. And that's why I'm running for president as a libertarian. I am trying to get the message of liberty into the political sphere and what that means for Americans and how we can wrest the freedom and liberty back from the central government and vest it in the people. And that's what this campaign is all about. It's about decentralizing the state.
Yeah, I appreciate your spirit there of decentralization and getting the power back to the people, we the people, to quote a famous document. And I also wanted to ask you or let me just correlate your claim that it matters to get the discussion in the public arena just by being able to be a candidate, being able to be in the debates, being able to get the campaign message out there is a way of framing thought and communicating it clearly so that more and more people can resonate with that, because there's a lot of people we have met all in our travels around the country, whether it's going to conferences or whether we're traveling to see family. We talk with people a lot, and even those who have visited the U.S. from other countries, and we ask them what their view is of what's been going on the last 3 years. And it's remarkable the number of people we've spoken with who have this common sentiment that things are not right. Things are upside down. We're being lied to. We're being told night is day and right is wrong. And yet they feel in many ways disconnected, like they're the only ones who feel that way. And yet they know they're not, but they just feel like it's not, there aren't platforms for as much as there should be where people can talk about that and get together and connect to their voices. And so I see what you say, that by being a candidate, you can get that discussion out there in the public sphere and move that forward and help people to understand why what they're feeling in their gut is in fact correct, and that we need to band together to resist this global pressure to steal our lives and our liberty. Okay, second question. You talked about, do elections matter? Does the presidency matter anymore? We've had some guests on our show talking about even the presidents or the so-called heads of state of different countries are really middle management, and that there's significant power structures, the deep state, et cetera, that are in place, that when such a person gets elected, they get, on their first day in office, they get taken into a private room and read the rules that they will be subject to, and like, we've already got this game all figured out, and here's the role you're going to play in this, and you're not to rock the boat. What is your perspective on whether presidents matter anymore?
Well, I don't think anybody is going to ride into Washington, D.C. like a white knight and fix it. I think that's a mistaken idea, and I think every other candidate in this race, including RFK Jr. and all the Republican candidates, I guess there are a couple of Democratic candidates. They all think this, and they all make their proposals, and they promote their campaigns on this basis, that this can be done in a top-down manner. Whereas what I'm suggesting is that, in fact, we need to gain power from the ground up. And that means we need to wrest power from the state at the local and state level, and vest it in the people by nullifying unconstitutional laws and mandates, and by creating parallel political, economic, social, and other networks. And this includes parallel currencies. One of the biggest problems facing Americans right now is this outrageous inflation and an unbelievable national debt. And these are tied together because it's the printing of money that's causing inflation, or the digital production of money in the future that will cause inflation. And the only way to get control of inflation is by using an alternative parallel currency and or currencies, and basically eroding the power of Fed's money monopoly over money by virtue of just simply using other currencies altogether. And this is one of the things that I'm promoting in this campaign, is we need to get together on a local level. We need to get rid of the idea that things are, the federal state government can fix the problems that it itself caused. That's the issue. The federal government cannot repair itself. It has to be dismantled and eroded from the ground.
The early 20th century author G.K. Chesterton talked about the distributism, which is the idea that it's the opposite of collectivism. It's basically that autonomy and the rights for property ownership and the right to work and all those things should be distributed down to the lowest level. In that case, he said for the family, that the society needs to make sure that it's supporting healthy families, that they can earn and save and build structures that are going to be conducive to community life and that sort of thing, and healthy communities. That ground up version is, I think, related to what you're talking about here. Can you talk to us about, you mentioned about using alternative currencies because the more centralized the currency becomes, if it's only under the control of the central government, and I guess the ultimate of that would be central bank digital currencies, the more it takes away the power of the people. If you could expand on that as other arenas that people should be called upon, if you were to get into the office of president, what you would encourage people to do to take back their liberty?
Well, they should get involved in local government, whether they run for office or become activists in their local governments. And they should try to they can't drive the global statist agenda through to the population unless it takes root at the local level. So the only way of resisting it is locally. And that means getting power locally. That means getting libertarian-minded people. They don't have to be of the Libertarian Party per se. Libertarian-minded people into local offices. And they could be Republican, they could be Libertarians, uppercase Libertarians, or they could be, well, I doubt they would be anything like Democrats because they're effectively socialists now. But yes, property rights are the key. Individual property is the foundation of all of our freedoms. And from that stems all other property rights, and all other freedoms are actually connected to that. So, yeah, we need to protect the individual rights of individuals and invest that power in the local level, taking it away from the state, and then to as local as you can get, down to the family level. That's where really the economy should be based. And that is where the basis of power should be. That's where we should get power rested. We should get power vested back into the family unit to make decisions that the state should not be making for us. And, this means, of course, if I were by, some miracle actually elected, and we are not, I'm under no delusions of what a long shot this is. But the point is that we need to get rid of as much regulatory mandates and other interferences in the economy, and to get rid of the collusion between these major corporations and the federal government and the various states to get out of this corporatist nightmare that we're in, which is sometimes mistakenly called capitalism by the left. It is not capitalism. Capitalism is a free enterprise system of free exchange. So we need to create kind of like more entrepreneurship in the individual, and more cottage type industries like from the 19th century, only now probably digital and so forth. That is the kind of economic system that we should be trying to achieve. And we need to get everything out of the way of that. And that means all of the regulatory regimes must go. RFK, for example, talks about regulation as the problem, and he talked about regulatory capture as the problem. The real problem is not the corporations that are capturing the regulatory agencies. The problem is that the regulatory agencies exist and are there to be captured. So the only way to get rid of this regulatory capture and the collusion that goes on between the state and big pharma, big tech, is to get rid of the regulation, get rid of the regulators altogether. That's the problem. Allow a free market, create a real free market in this country.
It's been so long since we've had that. Most people have never really tasted it or experienced it, but it's exciting to imagine what things would be like. There's always the specter that's raised of, how are you going to protect the worker from unsafe conditions, la, la, la. Others who are free market advocates often say, well, workers will go where they're treated best. And if they have a choice between which employer to work at, they're going to go to the one that treats their employees well. Before we get back to that, I wanted to echo one thing you mentioned earlier about taking action on the local level and how powerful we are when we do that. Just this weekend, there was a story that came out in the news about Holton Township in Michigan. Trustees have passed a resolution that designates the community as a Second Amendment sanctuary and establishes a township militia. I know in the Constitution, they talk about in order to have a well-ordered state, that the well-ordered militia being necessary for a free state, that the rights to carry and own and bear arms should not be infringed. Many people go off on the wrong tangent talking about self-defense or talking about hunting rights and that sort of thing, rather than it's the right to resist tyranny from without or from within. And I can't help but notice your "Wreck the Regime" slogan on your background there. I would like to hear more about that in a moment. But first then, if you could circle back with us on that idea of local, whether it's townships, cities, counties, states, taking back their sovereignty from the overreach by the federal regime, or heaven forbid, the globalist regime.
Well, there's the 10th Amendment is really pivotal here. This is how it's done primarily in political terms. That is nullification, nullifying federal laws and even state laws that are unconstitutional at the state and or local levels. And that would, for example, look at what that would have accomplished during COVID. It could have saved millions of businesses from going out of business thanks to the lockdowns that we could have resisted if we had local control, so that we would not abide by the mandates and the suggestions, the strong-armed suggestions, and even the state-imposed mandates that businesses shut down during this so-called pandemic, which drove so many people out of business and which inflated the economy and led to a lot of this inflation because of all the injections of cash during the COVID crisis. The government just thought they could just have the Fed print money endlessly and that would get us through this thing, a thing that they caused in the first place. So that's the kind of thing that we're talking about, and it can be done in many registers, not only the right to bear arms, but all kinds of laws that the federal government passes, for example, in connection with industry and the Environmental Protection Agency and what it imposes on production. None of this is constitutional. It could all be resisted at the local level, not by virtue of nullification.
One of the things that I think works against that takes the wind out of many people's sails when they try to stand up against the bullying by the federal government or its agencies is this idea that not just punitive, but withdrawal of federal funding has always been used as a coercion to force. First, it was like, I know when Jimmy Carter imposed the national speed limit and that sort of thing, and then states that didn't comply with that were, okay, you're not going to get highway funding. And then now states that don't comply with other certain mandates, okay, now you're not going to get your education funding. You're not going to get. So there's always been this problem where they say the hand that gives is always over the hand that receives. So when we think, oh, the government ought to do something, the government ought to solve all our problems, be careful what you ask for, because when the government is solving your problems, that means they can take away their support, and then that can cripple many of these states that really do have legitimate needs they're trying to deal with, but we've given over so much funding and so much of that power, therefore, to the federal government. How do you see that working out? In other words, for those communities that do nullify unconstitutional laws coming from either international, national, or state bodies, they do stand the risk of having their funding cut or whatever. How do we get out of that double bind?
Well, what we're going to have to do is to reorganize at the local level so that we're actually becoming more efficient in all respects in terms of education, transportation, law enforcement, etc. And so this way we could actually just refuse the federal funds in the first place. So once we take control of the government, we cut a lot of local expense that is nonsense. A lot of it is compliance with the federal government. You cut those costs. You cut a lot of fat out of the system. A lot of it being imposed on you through federal mandates and so forth. Then you're able to refuse the money and likewise do as you please.
I'll give a few anecdotal examples of that right now. That you're making me remember when we interview teaching farmer Joel Salatin from Polyface Farms of Virginia. He talks about, we had an interview with him called Romaine Recalls and Ridiculous Regulations. He talks about how these regulations are actually written by the big agri-industry. Then they're handed to Congress so that they can get passed into law. And they say, now here's the code. You got to follow the code or else. And it doesn't scale down well. It doesn't scale down well to the small scale producers, whether it's bakers, farmers, producers of produce, whether it's meat producers, whatever, dairy producers. It doesn't scale down well. So now you can't have a small scale thing because you don't have so many square feet of institutional stainless steel, whatever that you're supposed to have, that only makes sense when you're a very large scale producer. And we've seen overreach just in the past month or so. My wife and I depend on some medications that are being scrutinized and basically clamped down on by the FDA, saying, oh, we never really permitted this, whether it's homeopathic medicine or compounded medicine. They say, we're going to have to study this. We need more information on this. This is going to be no longer available. We use a water filter called a Berkey water filter. It's beautiful stainless steel with carbon elements, but they used silver in the carbon just to keep the carbon from being a place where microbes could grow. And so the FDA says, oh, actually, that's because it has silver in there, and silver can be considered a pesticide. You're actually selling pesticides, not water filters. So here, it's a gravity water filter manufacturer who's now completely handicapped. They cannot sell their flagship line of products, which is absolutely helpful to families because of this regulation. So I love the idea you have about dismantling the agencies, which were, by the way, put together by the industries in many cases.
That's right. The regulations and these regulatory agencies are what cause monopolies. That's how they get their monopolies over industries, is by regulation. It makes the cost of entry and the cost of staying in industries, completely unviable. So that's exactly why you actually have these huge corporations actually promoting regulation, as much as they seem to complain about it. On the other hand, it's them that benefit. So anytime you hear that regulation is something that helps competition or something like that, this is absolutely the reverse of the truth. Regulation eliminates competition. That's why your big manufacturers and producers in agriculture and other industries promote it endlessly, because it keeps other players out of the market.
So if we can now circle back to your banner that you have behind you, Wreck the Regime. So your name is Michael Rectenwald, Wreck the Regime. I get the wreck tie-in, and also the idea of let's dismantle the regime. What exactly are you talking about there? You've kind of alluded to it several times in this discussion. When you talk about the regime, are there different scopes that you're talking about? And help us understand that.
Yeah, so the regime, of course, means the centralized government, the federal government. And what we mean is by to wreck the regime, which I don't mean to be suggesting that I would do single-handedly. Wrecking the regime really is about this decentralization, localization, deregulation, and nullification process, so that we would wreck the regime by getting its power off of us. It's the same principle that I mentioned in connection with my book, and the grand refusal, is that we need to cut the puppet strings from ourselves. That's the same premise that this is involved. Now, if I were to become president, I'd like to win. I'd also like to win the lottery. I'm not, but if I won, I would abolish all kinds of agencies right off the top. The EPA, the FDA, the CDC, the CIA, the Federal Reserve, and you name it. I would eliminate them. Now, in terms of the Fed, you have to get a congressional bill passed, but I would promote it. So, yeah, we're talking about dismantling this crazy, unbelievably oppressive, centralized, bureaucratic, deep state set of apparatuses that are absolutely crushing the economy, limiting, curtailing, if not bridging our liberty altogether, and, leading us into all kinds of insane wars, funding and arming, and, wars all across the globe. All of this has to be dismantled.
I had a personal brush with some of this, I would call it predatory, sort of parasitic, monopolistic, industrial government collusion when I was last doing job searching, which was quite a while ago. But one of the very large companies I interviewed at was a company that did medical insurance systems development for any companies, hospitals, big HMOs, big systems that want to buy these information systems for managing. They call it health services, but it's what it became very clear to as I went through this layers and layers of this interview process was that this company and that industry exists for itself. It exists to feed upon the trough of gravy that comes out of Washington and to build ever and ever larger and larger corporate structures and huge databases to track everything about people and so on. But where health is in this, and where the individual is who needs wellness in to help them in their lives and with their families, was almost like an irritating annoyance that would be better off if they weren't there, because this beast lived to feed upon itself and to grow itself as though like a parasite that thought it could take over. It's like a tick being bigger than the dog, and it could go on living on its own, and the dog just became an unnecessary nuisance. That's the feeling that we've gotten in many areas of our lives when dealing with corporate or especially government agencies, whether it's the IRS or whatever. It's as though they think they can go on living on their own and they don't really need you. You be a history lesson into itself, how this all got upside down and backwards like that. But is that your view of why it's necessary to dismantle so many of these three-letter agencies, because they've just become piles of corruption with industry, but also not serving the people?
They don't serve the people at all. They're completely oppressive. They're basically, the state will grow as large as people let it. And it has a tendency, a proclivity to grow, to expand, and to add layers and layers upon itself. And every other candidate that's in this race is talking about adding something. Even RFK Jr. It's talking about adding these different layers to look over these other layers, to look over these other layers. All of this has to go. Yeah, indeed. Like in terms of the health, medical issues, health insurance and health care, my policy is basically to establish networks of direct relationships between medical providers and the patient through crowdsourcing and other means, so that you cut out the middleman of the insurance company altogether, and you go have a direct contract with your medical provider, and you pay a fee, and this cuts out insurance altogether. This is what I'm promoting, and I think this is the wave of the future. It must happen. And this bureaucracy that's built on top of the medical system is killing us, literally killing us.
You've put it very well there. I'm concerned for the safety of anyone who says it as clearly as you just said it, because I think that you're absolutely, you've got your finger right on the target there of the layers of corruption. I mean, we've heard it said that even the tax code is so complex that nobody really understands it all. And in fact, the IRS has had to, just as the medical industry has a hold harmless or immunity clause about, which is ironical because they're supposedly creating vaccines that are supposed to confer immunity, but they are the ones who want the immunity from prosecution against damage caused by their own products, unlike any other industry that has to stand behind their products. And the same with the IRS. They have hidden behind the cloak of, if any IRS employee that you call and talk to on the phone gives you advice and tells you, here's how to solve your tax problem, here's how to fill it in, they're not responsible if you do it wrong by following their instructions. So even if the IRS so-called experts tell you how to do it, you're wrong and they're not. So no matter what happens, the individual ends up just bewilderingly facing this unassailably large and always growing complexity that nobody can really understand, and that you're always going to be able to be made wrong. So that's a pretty tenuous place to live, because you feel like you can always be fined, punished, arrested, imprisoned, whatever, because you can always be made wrong if it's impossibly complex.
Yeah, it's stripped of everything you have, or thrown in jail. All of this is at the implicit force, it's the implicit end of a gun. All of this is really being done. I would abolish the income tax, which would then obviate the need for the IRS. The income tax is an outrage. It's theft. And it's completely oppressive. It is extortion, and there's no need for it. Once you get rid of it, then you see that all of these agencies can't be funded, and then you get rid of them. All of this stuff.
Hey, that's a different way. That's a different way to handle the budget crisis, right?
Right. Just look, there'll be a lot of bureaucrats out of work for a while. But they can find that once the bureaucracy falls away, the free market starts to flourish. People have opportunities all over the place. We would have a cornucopia in this country if it weren't for this parasitic state sucking us dry. That's the real bottom line.
I think that message is so important that it needs to be said and explained, because I think you'll get an immediate resonance from people, ordinary people of all walks of life, whether it's manual laborers all the way up to highly paid professionals or whatever. that sentiment that you just shared is so true that it will resonate with people. How are you planning on reaching out to people to get your message out?
Well, we're going to be surprising some people. I'm getting, for example, Dave Smith, who's a comedian and a major libertarian persona, will be on Joe Rogan this week, and he will be mentioning the campaign. And we expect I'll be getting on Joe Rogan very soon after that. I've been on Tucker Carlson, before several times. I expect that I'll get on there again on the Tucker. I think we're going to undermine the big media system at the same time, going around it, and we'll get this message out there. This will go.
Yeah, if in fact a lot of these three-letter agencies are in fact just subsidiary departments of some the largest corporations in each of those areas of influence, and I believe that that's a de facto truthful statement in many cases, then you need to get around that, because otherwise you won't be allowed to speak. And we're glad to have you here, glad to have your voice. Michael Rectenwald is the author of The Great Reset and the Struggle for Liberty, Unraveling the Global Agenda. If people want to stay in touch with your work, Michael, how should they stay connected?
Well, they could go to my personal business website, which is michaelrectenwald.com. If they want to get involved in the campaign in any capacity, it's rectheregime.com, rectheregime.com.
Well, Michael, thank you very much for joining us again on Liberty and Finance. Hope to have you back again soon.
My pleasure, Dunnigan. Thanks for having me.
Miles Franklin Precious Metals is one of America's oldest and most trusted bullion dealers. Miles Franklin is A+ rated and accredited by the Better Business Bureau, licensed and bonded, and has 0 complaints ever registered. Here at Liberty and Finance, we are licensed brokers with Miles Franklin. To order, simply call us, discuss your needs, and we can let you know our live inventory, prices, and availability, and lock in your order over the phone. Once your order is locked, the price is held for you regardless of market fluctuations, and the metals are reserved for you awaiting your settled payment. Within 1 business day of ordering, you will receive an email invoice detailing the order and payment instructions. Miles Franklin accepts payments by bank wire, ACH or electronic check, money order, check mailed priority mail, and cryptocurrency. The fastest forms of payment are bank wire and cryptocurrency. Upon settled payment, metals will ship out within 3 to 5 business days. You will receive tracking information via email. Domestic shipping charges are $15 for any order under 500 ounces of silver or 10 ounces of gold. For orders larger than that, domestic shipping is free. The package will be boxed, fully insured, and labeled discreetly, with no indication of the contents inside. For your privacy, the name Miles Franklin will not even be on the package. To talk to myself, Kaiser, my brother Elijah, or my father Dunnigan, call 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237.